Estamos en vivo aquí en FlareVet con el grupo original, con el Dave, Chris, Greg y el Dr. Mark, hablando de comunicación aquí en el episodio de junio de este año. Greg, ¿tienes algo que decir?
Sí, pues yo pienso que estás stuck en el lenguaje no es correcto. Necesitamos correctarlo en inglés, ¿sí? Te puedo
Ah,
¿sí? Okay.
sí, dale al botón
I
para
think
que yo cambie a inglés.
John got stuck in Spanish mode, so
All right.
he's not using appropriate communication techniques right now. Okay, hold on.
I was going to yell Copa Mundial.
And you should get English now.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. Sorry about that. We
Perfect.
Wanted to kind of make a point that when we speak in a lot of medical jargon, that's what it sounds like to clients sometimes. So, just be aware of your medical jargon, your medical termination, because clients sometimes when you talk to them that way, that's how it sounds to them. And Bill's here.
Hey, Bill.
All right.
Welcome, Bill.
Yeah,
welcome.
John, that's such a good point about the language thing. So we're speaking a totally different language, even though we're using English words a lot of the times, and we got to really make sure that we're speaking to the same level and in the same. We need to be understood when we're speaking. So jargon is just a foreign language to people, and if they don't speak it, don't waste your time.
I love that you use the word. Yeah, I love the way that you use the word, Greg, understood, because the book by Stephen Covey, where he talks about the 7 habits of highly effective people, he talks about seeking to understand others first so that you can be better understood. And so I think that that's something that we also have to learn as practitioners, is that we need to listen to our clients very well. Listening is a really strong skill set. And if we're listening to people and they get that sense from us that we're engaged with them, then I think that they're more likely to listen back and to take heed to some of our recommendations.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. Yeah. I've noticed that sometimes if we are rushed and we just want to be in and out of the room, I think that that's very obvious to the clients, that, when you just want to kind of tell them what you are thinking and not listen. I don't know how you can be successful without having a good listening ear for the clients, and being patient with them. I think it's important too. And I don't know if you do anything special, Dr. Mark, to when you're in a rush, like when you're wanting to go to the next room and you have a client in front of you telling you that their dog likes the red shirt over the blue shirt and they love going in the stroller. Like, do you have any tips for other vets, and to kind of like slow down and actually focus and listen, even though you had 10,000 things going on?
I think the first thing to understand, Jonathan, is that, even though you might be technically really sound as a veterinarian, you don't want to sound like you're transactional. And I think one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand about the veterinary profession is that the veterinary profession itself is very relational based. We make relationships with our clients. We make relationships with our patients. We create relationships with our colleagues as well. And so all of these things become really important. So we need to focus on building the relationship with our clients. And for myself, it was really interesting because I oftentimes would have a stool in my examination room, and I would either sit on my stool or I would sometimes sit actually on the examination table. And I always dressed pretty casually in my examination room because I didn't want them to sort of get that white coat syndrome, right? Like Mr. Doctor with my stethoscope and white coat. And I think sometimes as veterinarians, we want to purvey that we're doctors, but I'm not sure that that's always the right message to try to get clients to kind of communicate with us and feel really comfortable with us. And it also provides us a really good opportunity to engage with the pet as well, because if you're sitting on a stool, you're sitting nice and low. If it's a larger dog in the room, maybe a more aggressive breed, maybe it's a German Shepherd or something like that, it gives them to kind of feel a little bit more settled too. And now you're creating more of a conversation than anything else. And I think that makes people feel really comfortable.
Yeah. And Dr. Mark, I want to respond to that as a pet owner. I've got my cats up here. The 2 things. One, I spent, and these guys have heard me say this ad nauseum, but I spent almost 18 months trying to find my relationship-centered vet in the area I moved to. It took two different vets who were much more transactional, and I'm sure I'll talk more about what that feels like. But my current vet is not only very smart, but she also she gets down on her hands and knees and examines my cats at their level. And that has transformed how I think about her as a professional, because the cats actually relate to her a bit better. They don't love being there, but that level of understanding the pet. When I always talk about the triangle between pet owner and veterinary team, when that veterinary team is actually communicating with my pet well, creating relationship there, instantly I have a better relationship, and I just feel that trust, because it's weird. The cat trusts the vet. Maybe I trust them a bit more. It's really, really nice.
So what things?
Sorry, I just wanted to say one thing,
Dave.
Jonathan, with regards to that,
Yeah.
because it's related to what you said, David, and that is that in my hospitals, when I was looking to hire somebody new to work with in the hospitals, that's kind of a subjective kind of thing to measure, right? You can look at a CV and get an understanding as to what their skill set is or what their education is, but you really don't know who they are as a person. And you guys might find this a little bit entertaining, but oftentimes when somebody was in my waiting room, waiting for their appointment to come to see me for their interview, I would actually let my dog out into the waiting room. And I would have the door cracked, and I literally would be peering through this little crack in the door, watching how that person interacted with my loose dog in the waiting area. And there was a lot to be learned in that interaction. To your point, David, some of them would actually get down on the floor and pet my dog on the floor and interact with him. And there were others that were very kind of standoffish in those situations. But there's so much to learn from, how an individual interacts with that pet.
Yeah, that's great.
So, and I was asking, real quick, Greg, I wanted to ask both Chris and Dave, what are things that your vets have done that builds trust other than getting on the floor? Like in terms of what are things that they are good at communicating with you that have helped you have more trust in their medicine?
I'll let Chris
do you want to start, Dave?
Oh, let Chris go first, or either.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Chris.
So one of the things we've already touched on is the jargon. The jargon is difficult to navigate through, the technical terms, and not just the doctor or the assistant or the vet tech, the communication between the doctor and the assistant. When they speak, it's like they're speaking a different language almost intentionally. And it's kind of like walking into the room with one person and then two people speak in Spanish. Well, the other person doesn't. It's like, okay, I'm like right here. Can you talk to me? Let me know what's going on. I know
feel
you're
kind of
trying
like
to
plain English. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So as they're working through the challenges as a pet owner, I like to know what they're working through. If there's particular challenges or misunderstandings, and in some cases, I've caught on to where they've said something and I'm like, that's actually not happening. Like it may be a symptom, but it's not, like we haven't seen that. And if they do it in very technical terms, I don't quite understand what they're saying, and it excludes me from being able to chime in for that. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out is the communication amongst everyone in the room at the same time. Like just have a communal, open discussion with non-jargon layman terms.
I agree with that. I think there's a couple things come to mind. One, I've been in the industry for 25 years, so I'm not a veterinarian, but I've learned some lingo. I like it when someone recognizes that. I'm sure I annoy some of the veterinary teams because I'll tell them about my prior experience and point out things I've done. But they'll speak in a different language and they'll talk in product terms. I tailored the communication to me. It's probably like if you have a vet coming in who's a human cardiologist, you probably don't. You probably know, and you're trying to build that relationship. I think that's really important. Besides, John, your question was how do they build trust besides creating miracles, right? Miracles and making my animals live forever, which of course is your end goal. The biggest thing is including me in the conversation, right? We're talking about complicated conversations. Sometimes we're talking about emotional conversations. When you have a differential, when you're talking about options, I really love it when a veterinarian is talking out loud, explaining about different options they can do, giving me recommendations, but also choice in that journey, especially as it comes to end of life. That's really been big in building relationships, where I don't just get a prescriptive list, like a notepad of things I'm going to do. It's actually something I helped create through yeas and nays, and it wasn't just a high and low estimate. It's actually a conversation that goes a long way to building trust and bringing me back later.
You know, Jonathan,
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm thinking about something with regards to that as well, David, and I think that was really well put. You know, one of the things that I used to embody within my hospitals as well, it was actually a quote by Benjamin Franklin where he said, you know, tell me something and I'll forget it. Show me and I'll remember it, but involve me and I'll understand it. And I think as veterinarians, that is an important point. I think to Chris's point about having the jargon sort of splayed out a little bit better, and to your point about including you in the conversation, both of those comments kind of speak to that quotation. That as veterinarians, if we involve our clients through the process of their care, and I think especially now as we're getting into this technical era where clients are coming in, they're already making diagnoses for their pets walking in through the door. They already have a treatment plan in mind as they come through the door. So we as veterinarians have to learn to be inclusive, meaning that we have to learn how to, you know, work with our clients and involve them in the healthcare of their pet.
Yeah.
Greg, how do you include clients in your visits? What kind of thing do you do?
All this stuff, all of these things. So that that book that we had up there, I want to make a plug for that. It's a textbook about clinical communication techniques, but everything that we're talking about here is in there. So basically they lay out like 20 communication skills. The big picture here is it is all relationship based. I mean, that is the new model. That is what people want. We're talking about having clients feel like fully equal members of the decision-making team. And if you do that, yes, you get better compliance, you get better information retention. What I love about this book is very evidence-based. So we're in kind of this golden era of communication research, clinical communication for veterinary practices. And they looked at these individual skills. So something like, I think Dave might have been talking about it, but early on in the appointment, you figure out Chris was talking about it. You figure out exactly what's going on and exactly why the client is there. You know, you don't get tunnel vision. You don't rush ahead. Oh, the client said the dog was having difficulty breathing. Therefore, we need chest x-rays. We need full blood work, et cetera. I've done that. I've rushed forward. I've spent over $1,000 working up a dog for reverse sneezing, because I just did asking open-ended questions, really making sure I knew exactly what was going on before proceeding with diagnostics. So anyway, all of those skills in there, if you practice them very intentionally, you get better and better and better at doing this with the clients, finding out exactly what they want. It seems like it would take more time when you slow down early, but it actually saves you time. And again, that's one of the studies they reference in this book. So that book is incredibly important. It will save you tons of time with the interactions. It increases everybody's enjoyment with the entire experience. And I was just talking about this to a group in North Carolina. So like, this is, if you're really into the idea of being evidence-based, but also improving everybody's experience for veterinary medicine, like this book is fantastic for that. And I get no money from it, by the way.
Yeah, we'll see. I actually had a question, I guess for both Dave and Chris again, and I guess we can start with Chris, and then Dave can go after. I don't know. Sometimes early on in my career, I had a little bit of trouble recommending things without sounding like I was selling, right? Like I felt a little bit self-conscious about like, hey, I'm justifying all these things, but I don't want to sound like I'm upselling things and just doing things that, you know, don't really matter. So, Chris, like what things tip you off that a vet is trying to sell you shit versus actually these things matter, they're gonna help my dog? Like what kind of
pet
stuff?
Food in the lobby. Pet food in the lobby.
Pet food in the lobby.
If you're recommending pet food and the only kind of pet food is in your lobby, and you're like, hey, you need to switch over to this pet food, I immediately don't believe you. I think you're trying to sell me something. Like you got Hill Science Diet in your front lobby and all you're trying to sell me is Hill Science Diet. I'm not buying it.
Okay.
And that
So
literally
that's
happened.
when
That actually happened. And I asked for why they were recommending Hill Science Diet versus I had a different brand. I forget what it was at the time. And they're like, well, we've already done the research and that's the only one we carry. I'm like, well, you could have left the research comment out. I think really the latter part of the comment is what you're really trying to get at is like, you're selling me the only thing that you carry. So at that point, not that we didn't go to Hill Science Diet, but I didn't like my trust factor dropped significantly. And we did move the dog to Hill Science Diet, and we did it specifically because of my own research, and the research was lot control.
Gotcha.
But the doctor was unable to tell me why they were recommending it.
Because that's what they carry.
That's what they carry. So we did end up going there, but only because it forced me down the path of having to do my own research because the doctor was unable to do that for me. So that
what
is
about
one thing.
With like diagnostics and tests and medications, like what kind of thing are you looking for in that conversation?
Oh, so here's another one that just happened. I've got like this, something happened. It's happened twice. There's been a neurological reaction with my dog. At least I think there is. So I brought her in for neurological testing and she's clear. There's no problems. There's no issues, but they wanted to do myofascial pressure release for $800. And I'm like, okay.
Okay.
What's this going to do? And they're like, well, it's going to alleviate her pain. I'm like, okay, we're not really in here because she's experiencing pain. Are you seeing pain while you were doing your assessment? She was very thorough on her assessment. I will say that. Like she spent over an hour with the dog on her hands and knees. And so basically at the end of it, the doctor left. And then I was speaking to, one of the assistants, I don't know what her credentials were, but so I asked her, I said, did the doctor put a note in there of like what the pain level was for my dog? And she said, it's a 2. I'm like, so you want me to spend $800 on a level 2 pain that may alleviate it or not? I may have to come back multiple times. Like, can I just be completely candid with you? I would love to go through life with a level 2 pain issue. Like life would be grand. I'm not dropping, $800 or $2,500 on that. Like if it's not impacting her ability to move or whatever it is, like I can understand why you're recommending it, but should it be a recommendation or should it just be more of a, hey, FYI, this is available?
Right.
And
okay.
so
the way they're presenting it too.
The way they presented it seemed like more of a sales pitch.
Okay.
And understandably so. Like I'm going to come in for an hour and give you $700 plus taxes, and in Canada that's significant.
Gotcha.
So it's just kind of like,
Mark,
okay, I'll take a step back. And
I think Mark has a comment, and then I'll let Dave answer.
Well, I think you run the risk of coming across as being perfidious, right? You don't want to be deceitful or come across as being deceitful. I think any veterinary clinic that's relying upon food sales from their waiting area probably doesn't have their focus on the right aspects of practice. Especially considering that when you sell pet food, you're probably the lowest margin of any return product or service that clinic provides. So if they're relying upon that as being their means forward in developing a successful practice, I would already be questioning that to begin with. So that's kind of an interesting perspective. I also thought the other thing that you said, Chris, was really poignant, and that was this idea of selling. One of the things that I've always tried to purvey to my staff members is that we don't sell anything within the clinic. When people walk in through the door, when a Dave or a Chris walk in through the door, they're not looking to buy anything. They're seeking advice. That's what they're looking for. And so that is really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to purvey as veterinarians. We're trying to offer professional advice for clients. And I do think that confidence plays a little bit of a role in that matter. So I'd love to hear Bill, Greg, and John's comments on that. But I think that we do have to purvey a certain amount of confidence in what it is that we're trying to allude to our patrons in terms of what's best for their pets.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Dave? What do you see in your vet that kind of like sounds like they're upselling more than just being thorough?
Yeah, it's probably the alternative because I'm usually the one asking for blood work. I'm usually feel like more often vets are downselling. In fact, my cat who's got a terminal condition, she went to it for a checkup when I was on vacation, I was on a work trip, and the vet recommended that we skip blood work. I wasn't there, and I would have probably said, no, let's do it. I'm curious. So oftentimes they're downselling towards me, not upselling. But the gripe I have, actually, the one that probably gives me a Chris level frustration is I used to work for these companies, so I can complain about them. But the amount of selling that happens outside of the exam room through automated communications, telling me that my cat, the flea and tick specifically, that the amount of sales and communications that, and this is probably my overarching gripe about the industry in general, is you should not, the primary communication I get from a veterinary office shouldn't be the sales coming from their online store. And I think for a lot of vet hospitals, that is the primary communication. So it's not that the veterinarian in the exam room, they actually don't know about those online store sales very often. It's all the chatter that comes in your name and the practice name that sort of sets you up for, when I come in there, they're trying to sell me a lot of things, and it might be well-meaning, but they're very persistent. And so that comes across. And again, it's they. The company is allowing a third-party company to do it on their behalf. And they're just being, they're rather aggressive. That's probably an understatement. You can change the amount of communications, but so it's never the vet in the office. It's usually the veterinary practice who's trying to sell me a lot of stuff. And I'm just, I keep the emails today. I don't actually subscribe. I keep them because they annoy me. It reminds me of the industry.
So the vet was underselling and the practice was overselling.
Yeah. And again, the practice wasn't necessarily aware they were doing it on the overselling. It was just they let a third party do it for them.
Okay. I have a question for Bill, because I know, Bill, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? I've had some technical difficulties this morning.
No, I noticed you were in and out, kind of like I don't know.
It's anyway, I think I'm good now.
Something's going on. I had to curse for you because you weren't like
thanks.
on there, so I had to say shit because I feel like that's part of the podcast. Yeah, we need Bill to curse at some point. So Bill, I noticed that sometimes bringing up costs is kind of awkward. I don't know how you do it in your practice, if it's really you as a vet that brings up costs, or you have some kind of team member do it, or because I know for veterinarians talking about money could be awkward. I don't feel that way. I'm one to, kind of let them know an idea as I'm talking of what everything is, just to kind of keep them, in check with how much they're going to be spending. But how do you bring up costs, Bill, in your practice?
I largely, this is embarrassing. I guess it's not embarrassing, just where I live, but like it's a pretty well-to-do area, so I don't have to bring up cost that often until we get into four figures. But one thing I've noticed is that since we've opened the urgent care, people are very, like, when they come to an urgent care on a Sunday or whatever, they're like very motivated to get it done, and they are much less concerned with cost. They're just like, just do it, just do the things. And it's like the conversation that Dave's vet has, like, you don't have to do this test, like that's not going to change our treatment course or like identify anything. I'm very nonchalant about it, and that's probably terrible advice by and large.
Mark, do you have some good advice?
No, you know what? I'm probably very much the same as Bill that way. I was probably pretty nonchalant about it as well, but I do think that I showed a certain amount of confidence in what I was recommending. And of course, a lot of that is built upon the relationships that you build up over years with these clients. Because oftentimes these are clients that you've worked with for a long period of time. And I think a lot of what you've done in the past, Jonathan, speaks to a lot of how people will respect you in the future. I think about some of, some of the value sets as what we have as veterinarians. And maybe if I could throw out a little bit of a scenario, like you have old Mrs. Brown that comes into your clinic and she's not well off and she doesn't really have a lot of money to her name. Maybe she even had to take a taxi to get to the clinic. Maybe this is a dog you haven't seen in 2 or 3 years, but she comes into the clinic because she's concerned because she noticed a lump on her dog. And so you bring her into the room and you meet with Mrs. Brown and you start to engage with her and you start to engage with the pet and you start doing your physical examination. So you're going through the ropes there, taking the temperature, taking the pulse, doing the respiration. And then you ask her, can you point out this lump that you're speaking of? And she says, yeah, it's just down here underneath of his belly. So you're like, oh, okay, I need to get on the floor. So you get on the floor and you're climbing underneath the dog and you're looking underneath and you're having a hell of a time trying to figure out what this lump is that she's talking about. And finally, she has to kind of get down on the floor too and kind of point out, oh, it's this right here, this lump right here. And you say this as you question her. And she confirms, yeah, that's the lump I'm concerned about. And you kind of get back up and you sit on your stool and you look at Mrs. Brown and you say in a very calm voice, well, Mrs. Brown, I don't want to embarrass you, but what you've noticed is a nipple. And she says to you, but he's a boy. And you say, well, Mrs. Brown, that's okay, because boys can have nipples. That's quite normal. So, you know, you go through the process. You notice with this particular dog that they're not ill in any particular way. Maybe they're up to date on vaccines. Maybe they've got all their parasiticides. Maybe I don't have to sell them the dog food that Chris was referring to in the front area. And so you don't feel as though that you've really done a whole lot in that situation as a veterinarian, except that you've relieved her of her concerns. And oftentimes that would be the client, Jonathan, that I would probably let go without charging. I probably wouldn't charge that lady for that appointment. You know, I would just say, you know, it's okay, Mrs. Brown, you go ahead and go home. I just want you to be reassured. Everything else is up to date here. We don't have anything else to be concerned about. The rest of my examination was normal today. Why don't you go home? And I'll tell you, every veterinarian on this call knows the value of that appointment. The value of that appointment is that, right? That's client, that's relationship building, but it's community.
The clients
building.
know the value of that as well, Dr. Mark. I just want to point out, like, we do see that, we know that, and it's nice to see.
Well, I think, you know, we all know that Mrs. Brown, when she goes to the grocery store this week, or she goes to her community hall or to her church or wherever it is that she attends, you know, she's going to talk very fondly of that veterinarian and how that veterinarian made her feel respected, how that veterinarian still took their time with her. And on top of all that, didn't even charge her for it. Like, how many other people will come and start seeking your services with that kind of very simple story? Like, who cares about the $100 exam fee in that situation? And I think this becomes a really big problem too, guys, with respect to how, you know, outside communities have kind of integrated their way into veterinary medicine, is that this is one of those things you can't measure on an Excel document, right? This is a subjectivity that those of us who are in profession know the value of that appointment, but it's a little bit hard to measure.
Maybe returning clients is might be a little bit of a way, but you're right. You know, it's hard to measure those things. It's like in sports, right? The little things that you are not in the stats are the things winning the games, and those little moments like that, I think, are key to build trust. And we're reaching a level that I think people maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are starting to think of us like mechanics or lawyers, or, you know, people that are in it just for the money, or vets are just in it for the money. I saw a 60-minute episode that came out like in 2012 that was pretty bad for our profession. It really had a lot of people talking about how they were scammed by vets, and I think ever since then it's just been a pretty downward spiral of you know, having to build that trust back in terms of, you know, I'm not here just for the money. I'm here for your pet, and for you, you know, and not. It's been a uphill battle with that. Bill, you have some?
I think most of my clients, right, like are fine, right? Like they come in, they expect, like, hey, these are what the things, these are the, you know, this is what we need to do to diagnose it or figure it out, or this is going to direct our treatment plan. This is what it's going to cost, and the end. Every once in a while, you get somebody who's on guard, right? Like somebody who's just convinced you're trying to cheat them. And I will often, at some point in that conversation, be like, listen, you can trust me or you can not trust me. But if you don't trust me, you should find somebody you do trust, because this is silly, right? Like if you're convinced that I am secretly trying to cheat you, that I'm trying to outsmart you, that I am trying to, like, then, like, what are we doing here? Like, it's antagonism. It's wasting your time. It's wasting mine. Like, you want to, and one of the best questions I've found is like, okay, what are we hoping with those clients, especially with those clients, is like, what are we hoping to accomplish today? Well, I want them to be pain-free. Okay, well, to find out what's causing them pain, I need an x-ray, right? Or, you know, I want them to not be peeing everywhere. Well, to do that, I need a UA and I need some blood work. And if they don't buy that, right? Like if they don't buy that linear connection, and I don't mean purchase, but like buy into, then I'm like, we just need to stop. This isn't going anywhere. Like this is just going to get worse and worse until you go find another vet. So why don't you just find another vet and assume that we're not out to get you.
I wonder, Bill, and maybe Chris and Dave could speak to this. I wonder if one of those solutions is the idea of options, right? Because I think that maybe if somebody feels like they're steered in only one singular direction, that might be a red flag. Chris and Dave, you guys were talking about some red flags earlier, right? And so is that a red flag for you as clients? Do you get red flagged if you're, steered in one specific direction as opposed to maybe having an option A, B, C?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
So I'd like to point out two things. So yes, Dr. Mark, I agree with that. If I don't have options, it causes me to question more. And reasons for the options, right? Like we've got treatment path A, treatment path B, this is why. But the other thing I want to point out too is probably not the most popular thing to say, but Bill and I have had this discussion numerous times. Some of your clients, the best place for them is with your competitor. They're just a terrible nuisance on your front staff. They probably shouldn't be pet owners. They probably can't afford to be pet owners. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but as it relates to the pet and the staff that's having to treat with them, like the best place for them might be to go find alternative medical treatment, because they don't, like, to Bill's point, they don't have the trust. They don't want the trust. They can't afford the trust. For whatever the motivation is behind it, some customers, the best place for them is with your competitor. And I say that not from the pet or from the pet owner's perspective. I say it more from the front end staff who's got to request collection of payment and deal with the objections and deal with the problems and deal with the challenges. Like, I'm familiar with Bill's practice, and I know that he spends a lot of doctor time dealing with his clients one-on-one. And then, they move through to the front desk to get payment resolved and whatever it is. Some other places, the doctor just moves to the next exam room. And so there's some young girl who probably doesn't have a tremendous amount of experience in life or in the veterinary field who has to say, hey, look, I need to get $800 from you. And the person's like, well, I don't have that money. And then the discussion begins, right? And it's just a terrible environment to have your employees in. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. So I just wanted to throw that secondary thing of like my marketing hat back on versus my client patient thing. And Bill and I have had these very candid discussions. They're not easy discussions, but it's reality. It's the way life is not all clients are created equal.
Well,
I have a question for Mark. People ask me all the time, like, I don't know how you feel when people ask you this, is what would you do if it was your dog or cat, right? Like when I get asked that question, I have to divide myself in two things, right? I'm like, well, I'm a veterinarian. It's not a fair question for me what I would do with my own dog in this situation because A, B, or C. But I understand the question, like try to put myself in their position and answer what I would do if I was them, right? Like, how do you handle that question, Mark?
Yeah, I'm very much the same as what you sort of alluded to, Jonathan, in that, the first words that kind of utter from my mouth are, it is an unfair question in the sense that I have access to all of this stuff. It's so reachable for me to get to that access. And so I try to take a more holistic approach with the client in that situation. That this decision is primarily focused on the patient, number one. So what are the patient needs? And I think Bill was alluding to that earlier as well, like kind of figuring out specifically what is our goal here? What are the patient needs? And then how can we prioritize? So maybe it's not just about options, but it's the priority of those options as well. So I think that that's kind of the way I would work it through with that particular client. And obviously we'd all do everything all the time if we could, but that's just not the real world. And even us as veterinarians, I mean, even with myself and my own pets, it's not that I've done 100% of the 100 things that I could have done with every single one of my pets all of the time. Mm-hmm. I go through the same sort of process. And maybe a way to explain that to clients. And, I'll go back to a comment maybe that Greg made earlier about how this is sort of this new thing about this new relationships. Actually, I don't think it's new at all. I think we've always been building relationships as veterinarians. I think it's actually a base portion of our ethos in this vocation, because way before technology, I used to have a whiteboard in my examination room. And that's what my whiteboard was doing there. It was actually to draw pictures and, write things out for my clients as I'm having a discussion with them. And, you can create your own sort of algorithm in that process. It's almost like machine learning, but on a wall with a marker. So you can do that. And so you can kind of go through that process and say, here's where we're starting, and here's where that algorithm can kind of work its way to. And, it starts to create a little bit of a pathway for them, right? There's a journey of this medical case that you're working up, let's say. And so I think that, once they have that, that's really helpful. And I think having the options is super helpful as well. A saying that I repeat way too often, and everybody jokes with me about this because I do purport it on a regular basis, is the idea that contrast is the mother of clarity. In that, in order for you to know what choice to make, you need to know what options you have. And I think that becomes super duper important from a client's perspective.
Yeah, and I want to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
so Dr. Mark had asked the question before about options, and I think it certainly depends on complexity for me, right? Sometimes I want your recommendation. I don't need options. In fact, I don't know where I did, but I talked about the Cheesecake Factory menu and how ridiculous the anxiety-inducing it is, because it's too many options, right? It's within limits.
Right.
But,
yeah. True.
But I tell you, the one thing I want to go back to, because Bill, you weren't here at the beginning, but Dr. Mark started with just talking about how important relationships are about building trust, and it's so intuitive. But I think we forget sometimes that the veterinary client relationship is really no different at the core to any relationship we have. I expect the same thing from my mom's neurologist. I don't get it, but I expect them to talk to me like a human being and give me options and explain it. I expect them not to try to ivory tower and medical jargon me. I think it's the same thing with you, and I with all of this relationship is that we're actually investing the time in it. If you feel rushed and seem rushed, I think you probably have to come up with ways so the client doesn't feel that, or doesn't feel like you've been like, I don't know what the answer is, but that the client, I love the fact that Bill spends time with the clients. I've oftentimes said my vet is probably not her hospital manager's favorite vet, because she spends time with me and I ask her questions about my other cat. So I'm getting pre-examined by it. But I enjoy the vet visit more than my cat does. But it's because we're investing that time. At the end, we're actually, the transaction is financial, but also we are moving the health of the pet forward. And maybe I'm just not the bad client. I'm the one who comes in saying yes to everything.
But I think that makes it really, I think what Mark said and what Dave said are really make a good point together, because what it like sometimes talking about the options that you're not recommending and why, like giving that contrast is super useful. Like, hey, we don't need to do that test because that's not what we're looking for. We need to do this test because it is. I think that contrast helping clarity thing, rather than just, I mean, I'm happy to take Dave's money and carpet bomb diagnostics, but it still feels irresponsible.
Especially when they bring they bring an estimate from a different clinic and they show up and they're like, well, this vet wants $3,000 for this, and you're like, well, I'll do it for $29.99. So good.
I have one of those today. The local ER charges, 5 to 7 for a foreign body. Not everybody can afford 5, and they do a better job than I do, right? Like 24-hour care. It's just objectively better, right? But I can do it for $2,000, and the owners get to keep the cat, and everybody's happy, right? Like, I think that makes a big, and like the ER loves it because I ship the total disasters their way, and I'm sure they roll the odd grenade mine. So I do think like working with the local vet, like hey, I don't want this case, but these guys are better at this case. Like that does help too.
I had a follow-up question. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, Jonathan. I kind of wanted to go back to Dave's comment there. Chris's comment. Chris, you made a comment about, these bad clients and getting rid of the bad clients, for example, and it's okay that they go to somebody else. And all joking aside, I used to take that client and put it under my partner's name so that the client would go see them next time and he would have to deal with them. But that was just sort of an inside joke that we had in the clinic. And you know what I think the problem
in-house
is
second opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Go see my buddy over there. And then of course,
right.
we joke about it afterwards. I think that there's, what's really interesting, and this is kind of getting a little bit philosophical here, but when we think about culture, because culture is kind of all the rage in the discussions of veterinary hospitals, especially with consolidation of veterinary medicine and whatnot, and what is the culture within the class, within the clinic. And I think one of the things we miss is that culture in of itself is just the how. It's just how we exercise the why. And what is the why? The why is your ethos within the clinic. And what is that ethos? Well, the ethos is kind of your mission. And what is the actual baseline ethos of veterinarians in general? Well, it's kind of rooted in the idea that animals are worthy of care. They're worthy of protection. They're worthy of advocacy. As veterinarians, there's not one veterinarian that would disagree with that baseline ethos. And if you have a client that comes in, Chris, who doesn't have that same baseline ethos, who doesn't see animal care in the same view and vision and ethos as a veterinarian, I can see where, a veterinarian and a client won't line up eye to eye. And you're right. That's probably a client, not even from a transactional point, not even from, disrupting my front office CSR, just from the standpoint is that we just don't see animal care the same way. We don't see animal husbandry the same way. We don't see the responsibility that we take for that patient the same way. And just by having that problem at the foundational level, I think that has a lot of problems associated with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like, the clients are part of the team, and you don't want somebody in a team that doesn't think like you, right? If you have a team and the clients are part of that team, then why you have somebody there that doesn't think the same way as the rest of the team? So it's okay to tell the client, like, hey, we don't think alike. We don't have the same philosophy here. I feel like maybe you have a better fit out there for you, right? And that's okay.
That's what Bill was saying.
Yeah, exactly. For the sake of the patient, right? And your mental health and the clinic and everybody wins if you're honest with that client and let them know, like, hey, we're not on the same page here. And it's not often, right? You guys don't do that often. Once in a while, maybe.
No.
It is maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah, it's not that often. Yeah.
I mean, if it's twice a year, it's a lot.
The problem might be you if it's often, right?
If it's like every day, you're like, I don't think it's everybody else.
Yeah, I don't think it's the clients. I think it's the vet here.
It's always.
I'll say this: one of the funniest, and this is the worst client in the world to me, is the one who sends the spouse who doesn't know the dog's name to the vet.
Has never pet him in his life. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, what brings you in today? It's like, my wife didn't tell you. It's like, man, she didn't tell you. Like, come on. And like, the decision making is outside the room, and you're trying to build a relationship and like an explanation with somebody who doesn't have the decision making power.
That's hard.
Yeah,
and
somebody that just
then you're like, I haven't built, all the things you do to build a relationship didn't matter.
Right.
They just take home an estimate, and then you get an angry phone call the next day.
Yeah.
And from the spouse or whatever. And it's like,
because you didn't give him any
that's the worst
information,
client
right?
to me.
That's actually backed up statistically, Bill, because I work for one of the regulatory bodies as an investigator, and I don't think it would be any surprise that it's typically ER doctors that get complained against the most. And why do we think that is? Well, those are high stress situations with people you don't know. And so that speaks a lot, I think, to that situation, and that if you don't have that relationship, if you don't have some of that historical foundation that you built upon, and then on top of that, you're putting yourself into a high duress situation, maybe life-death situation. Yeah, there's definitely open doors for having miscommunication for sure.
Yeah. And I think I don't want to fire John up here with this comment because, but I might. One of the reasons I don't telehealth doesn't work for me in part because I need that in-person relationship. And when Bill tells the story of like, I let my partner bring the cat in because I was traveling and I trust her. I can't imagine a stranger type of relationship where I have a third party where I don't actually get to interact with the human being and the pet at the same time. That feeling of being out of the loop. And telehealth does that concept. I've rejected it on the human side. I rejected it on the pet side because I can't build that relationship. I can't connect with someone. So maybe I should go back to my earlier conversation too, where some of these things will fail it's going to be if I don't get that in-person time with someone, I don't actually
Yeah.
feel like a human being. There are so many more, and I've got a feeling, Dr. Mark, you probably have a stat on this. You've got a lot of thoughts. The fact is, we're communicating right now on like 3 levels: sound, sight, but we're missing so many other variables that we can't really understand. That we can't build trust very easily in these artificial relationships, and never can I imagine sending a proxy in unless it's an emergency to see Dr. Bill.
Sure.
I can't imagine that, and then maybe they're going to call me on the phone and say, "Hey, should we do a vaccine?" That's bizarre.
And especially in those situations, like those emergency visits where you're like, you need to, like, if you don't decide right now, the pet is going to decide for us, right? Like, if I don't put a chest tube in, like, immediately, we're not going to have, this is going to be a hypothetical conversation.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to add,
we have a
sometimes you have to solve for the medicine before you solve for anything else, and that does upset people sometimes.
Yeah, and we have a whole hour on telemedicine, I think next month. So, I just want to say that the only telemedicine that works, in my opinion, is when the pet is in front of you and the client might be on the phone. That's it.
Yeah.
But if the pet is not in front of you, there's no way. There's no way that you can be a thorough veterinarian with Zoom screen exam. I didn't want to fire you up, John. I literally said that. I fired you.
I know.
It's hard not to, though. I'm Hispanic.
I want to add a different dimension to this conversation. And I know Greg's driving, might be listening, but he just posted a comic this week about basically about the humanization of pets and how it makes your job even more difficult. And the comic was a pet owner, a mummy holding a mummified cat, and the vet basically saying, "No, I can't resurrect your cat." And I think that what I'm bringing up here is the challenge of I was at a bar at the airport last night, told someone I worked in animal health, and she immediately drifted to, "Did you ever have to put a dog down?" And she started to like feel the emotion of losing a pet. And I told her what I always tell people, which is it sucks. But when we consciously adopt a pet, we're in a contract with the pet. There's a probability we're going to outlive that pet. But we're dealing right now with a lot of folks with the humanization of pets. It makes the communication a lot harder when someone is feeling emotionally connected to their pet as if it's a human being. I think it just creates a bigger challenge in communication if you're working with someone who's that attached. And I love my pets dearly, but I don't expect. I joked earlier about you saving their lives and extending their lives forever. I think it's made our bidirectional communication even harder because the industry has made these pets just at the human level, and we can't necessarily treat them at the human level.
You have any comments on that, Greg? I know you're driving, but don't get into an accident or anything. But what's your comment on that?
No, that's fantastic. This is so the emotional importance of pets in general across the board is just going way, way, way up. So I wrote this as it's a very dominant force in our industry because it's our job to not only take care of people's family members, most people do describe their pets as members of their family, but to also remember these are different species with different, not only different biological needs, but different emotional needs than people. So I think that does put us in a very difficult position. I do practice mostly in the ER. I'm in these crazy conversations. I'm with people who are incredibly upset in a huge time crunch. And that's why I do advocate for really like practicing these communication skills very intentionally, because I swear they work in these environments that are high stress, high stakes. People get very upset, but when you can come in and you can show the person, hey, you're in this scary situation. You're very afraid of what's going to happen to your animal. You're very afraid of what it's going to cost. You're very afraid of the potential suffering that the animal is going to go through. You have to know how to navigate that for the person, because the reality is what the reality is. It's your job to both understand the reality and to help the client navigate that reality. And it's not about like, oh, I think we should do this. You're a difficult client, so I need to manipulate you to do this. It's like, no, I am your guide in this scary jungle place. Let me show you how to get through this with balance, with prioritizing, right? What's the most important thing? Is it limiting suffering? That's a different conversation than getting an answer. And we got to figure out what resources you have for that.
Gotta meet them at their level, right? Like if you have somebody that's panicking in front of you and crying, you have to kind of meet them at that emotional stage. Because if you're trying to be doing your transactional job, that's not gonna work. They're not gonna hear one word. I think bringing them to a place where they are emotionally able to listen and to have a conversation, I think it's worth our patience and our time to wait till they're there to then talk medicine.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mark.
Can I do one more quick thing?
Yeah, of course.
So the idea of empathy as a learned skill just cannot be understated here. You can learn empathy. There are multiple studies showing that empathy training improves empathy amongst veterinarians. There's multiple studies showing that empathy scores are generally kind of low in our communication with clients. And if you understand empathy as a skill and you deploy it appropriately, I think almost nothing else will be as helpful as that in building relationships and maintaining trust with clients.
I love that, because I think you should treat the communications, the empathy, all of it like a skill that can be practiced and learned. And you should always, if you're practicing medicine, you always should try to be getting better at that.
Yes.
Greg's lectures are really good for that. The workshops are really good for that. Are you at AVMA again this year?
Yes, sir.
But I also think the vets should know something, and you can do everything right, and it can still not get a good outcome. And that's not a reason to give up, and not to try, or not to always be getting better. But I wouldn't really judge yourself too harshly on batting average. I think veterinarians also really try hard to fix that one terrible client who just wants a rabies vaccine and leaves a 1-star review no matter what he does. I had a client. I heard a story of a client one time who left a 1-star review because he never gave a 5-star review for any service he had to pay, for which he had to pay. I'm like, how good do I have to be to make this guy believe in capitalism? I'm not that good. But that's no reason not to try to get better.
Yeah. Even church isn't free. People have to pay at church. So yeah, I don't know what that guy is talking about. I think Mark had a comment though.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I was going to go on a different kind of tangent. I was actually going to go back to what David brought up. A word that I thought was really interesting, David, was the word contract. You brought up this idea that we're in a contract, because I'm writing a book right now. It's called Of Creatures and Covenant. So the word covenant, very much like this contract, this idea that there's an agreement between us, the veterinarians, and the patients that we look after. There's an agreement between those of us who adopt pets and the responsibility that we have to take for those pets as well. And again, I think that does lay into that sort of baseline ethos. Again, it kind of comes back to that point. I love what you said, Greg, about the empathy side of things. I think that that's super important. And I do think that what's really interesting about that is that there is a component of this nurture nature aspect. I agree that there's a learned component for sure. But I know some people that are just really just naturally empathetic people as well. And I'm not sure that they've ever taken a lesson in it per se, but they're extremely skilled in that area for sure. But if you don't have it, it doesn't mean that you don't feel it. It just might mean that you don't know how to present it, right? Because I think as veterinarians, we all feel the empathy, but we might not express that empathy the way that we could or should in a better way as we're communicating with clients. And maybe that's the skill set, Greg. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And even I would make a distinction, right? Because it's true. I don't know any veterinarians who are not empathetic. The problem is we are so strongly empathetic towards animals that we sometimes get frustrated. I mean, it is a frustrating job lots of times, and then we look to externalize that frustration on the people, right? Oh, they didn't do this. Oh, they didn't bring him in earlier. Oh, they got a bulldog. What were they expecting? But we need to remember that the people, the clients, are animals too, and they deserve empathy. And not only
not only can we look at them in a different way as not the problem, but as people that are experiencing pain and suffering that we can actually help. I love this idea. I came across this in a talk one time about dealing with difficult people, people that are blaming you, people that are being rude to you, and recognizing that you can use what's called like emergency empathy in those situations. You're in a combative conversation or communication with somebody, deploy emergency empathy, and it does amazing work to turn people around. It's like having a really aggressive, fear aggressive animal in the clinic that's threatening to bite or scratch or, damage you. And it's being able to use words to turn that animal around into somebody that's trusting you and willing to work with you. It's incredible.
I just had a quick question for Dave. Dave, what is 28 plus 9?
You're gonna make me do live math? 37.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Real quick, I have a question real quick, Dave. You can answer in like 2 words, and you can answer 37 to the question too. That's all good. I know we've talked a lot about the exam room, but like, what are ways of communicating with clients that you feel are important, especially in where we're at in technology? Like, what are ways that we should be communicating with clients other than in the room?
Yeah, I love the technology question. These guys know, maybe Dr. Mark doesn't, that I built my own app to help manage the end of life or palliative care for a cat who keeps on kicking. Right, she's doing great. It's probably not technology's fault, but my vet actually engaged with it to help me understand it better. So I'm a big proponent of asynchronous communication. I'm a big proponent of the idea of not. I know this causes a lot of vets a lot of stress because they think I'm already busy enough, but staff members can help with it. Sometimes it's more than just reminders. It's actually a lot of times it's more than just reminders. It's about just checking in. So if you do send a pet home with a therapeutic regimen, why not have an automated follow-up a week later to check in and see how that therapy is going? It does not necessarily expect you to have suddenly questions back and forth, but most practice management systems can do that. And a lot of the communication system, the app-driven apps can do that too. Because then you're getting, I like to think that sort of dilutes all the other messages that are coming out from the vet that are saying, buy this shit. I just dropped a John or a Bill. Just buy.
Bill, yeah.
You're also sending messages that say, I know your pet, you were here last week, not just a survey. Taking a critical look at some of those things, how you can automate them, and not being so worried that that's going to drive a question back from me. It's actually going to make me feel like you actually care about Madison in this case and are checking in. I don't think that can be understated. It takes some work on the setup.
Yeah, and I feel like follow-ups are important. Follow-ups show that you care, and I think showing that you care, it's key to building trust and having a client that will follow you with their next pet and the rest of their pet ownership. I think follow-ups are key. Follow-ups, I think. How do you handle follow-ups, Dr. Mark? What's your way to like?
Maybe
how
the
often
one
and
thing.
when?
Yeah, maybe the one thing I would tag on to Dave's comment is that I think the reason, Dave, you find that okay is that this isn't technology independent of your veterinarian.
Right.
This is technology used in conjunction with your veterinarian. That's what you said. You were the one who said that. And I think that's where the crux of that relationship is okay. So, if you think about artificial intelligence as a whole, maybe that in itself is a little bit audacious for most people. But if we said that it was collaborative intelligence in the sense that it's technology working with your medical care provider, that's a very different message.
Yep.
And I think in a world where, trust is going to become a huge factor in terms of what people choose to do and not to do and how they get involved with technology, I think that's a way to kind of rein things in a little bit and maintain some level of relationship.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's one more comment before I got to drop is using prompts is great too. I think we spent a lot of time when I was at a diagnostic company building a diagnostic report. I love it when my vet shows it to me in conversation, circles things, but I also love it when they send it to me because that's the artifact that's important to me. And again, Bill knows I apparently am in love with diagnostics. He can just use me for all the diagnostics because I love them. But prompts are great. So visuals. So even if you're sending home an instructional automated thing that communicates about how to take care of your diabetic pet or what to do now that I've told you that your dog is overweight, those things are meaningful. People do read them. And I don't think you should think that a lot of folks just put those in the spam folder. They do create that collaborative communication. I just made a joke and Bill couldn't hear me, and that saddens me.
Well, it's part of the experience, right? It's like when the vet can hear the client, they cannot help the pet. That's I think that's the lesson there.
Yeah.
So I want to respect everybody's time. We just hit the hour. If anybody needs to drop, it's all good. I feel like an hour is never enough time, but I also don't want to spend 4 hours, and take everybody's time like that much. But
I'll drop down.
all right. Thanks, Dave. We'll see you next month.
Guys, run. I'm so far behind today.
All right.
You guys know personally what's going on for me. So I'm upright, and that's a win, but I'm very behind, so I got to run.
See you,
All
Bill.
right.
Great to see you.
Thanks again for
Great to see you,
joining.
Bill.
Good
Take
seeing you,
care.
Will. All right. So any final thoughts, Dr. Mark? Any big picture things here?
No, I think this was a really good conversation, and I think it just reinforces the importance of good communication with clients. And I think that, one of the I don't know if you'd call it an equation or not, but one of the mathematical equations that we've always made in veterinary medicine is that good medicine equals good business, and maybe good medicine comes from good communication.
I agree. There's no way to be a good veterinarian without good communication. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but the pets can talk. So obviously, the better communication we have with the client, the better success we're going to have with the medicine. So that's a really
100%.
good point. Well, I appreciate you joining us, Dr. Mark, last minute.
Thank you.
I really,
it was a lot of fun.
Thank you. That's the whole point. That's why we do this. It's we want people to learn and have fun and enjoy what we're doing here. So I think you're a good person to have on here, and we appreciate you. And Chris, all your help. We're gonna drop now, and then we'll see you next month. We're gonna be talking about the veterinary client-patient relationship and telemedicine, telehealth with Dr. Laurie Teller. That's going to be our next guest here. And hit that follow button on YouTube. The more people that are subscribed, the more people we can reach. So I appreciate you all listening, and we'll see you next month. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
See you, gents.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.